Today, we're digging into a really sharp argument that's been making the rounds online. It's a take on Australia's housing crisis that connects it directly to the nation's Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. It's a pretty bold claim, so let's break down how it's made.
Right off the bat, the source material we're looking at makes its position crystal clear. It doesn't just suggest there's a problem, it declares a total system failure. This isn't pulling any punches. It sets a really urgent tone from the very first sentence.
And to back that up, the script immediately paints a picture of the human side of this crisis. It points to a national vacancy rate that's fallen below 1%, which is just an astonishingly low number. But it's not just about stats. It's about the real-world consequences. People forced to sleep in their cars, students lining up for hours just to see a single room, and tents popping up in public parks. This is the reality the source uses to frame the whole argument.
So once that bleak picture is established, the argument asks the next logical question, right? If things are this bad, what is the government, what is the leadership actually doing about it? This is where the focus shifts directly to the Prime Minister.
And this is the response the source highlights. It uses this quote from the Prime Minister to frame it as a moment of defiance, a deliberate choice to stick with the current policies despite the crisis we just saw. For the script, this is a really critical turning point in its narrative.
And that quote leads us straight to the core accusation of the whole piece. This is where the argument moves beyond just a critique of policy and into something, well, a lot more pointed and personal, a potential conflict of interest. The entire case really builds around this one number, 5. According to the source, that's how many real estate properties are in the Prime Minister's personal portfolio, and that number is the foundation for the whole conflict of interest claim. So here's the crucial point the source makes. It argues there's this direct, inverse relationship. The very market forces that are crushing renters, collapsing vacancy rates and intense demand, are the exact same forces that are driving up the value of property portfolios. So one group's crisis becomes another group's financial gain.
Now, this chart is basically the visual centerpiece of the whole argument. The blue line, you can see, tracks the rental vacancy rate as it falls lower and lower. At the exact same time, the red line tracks the property gains in the PM's portfolio as they rise. The argument draws a clear line right here, after May 2022 when Albanese took office, to show these two trends just dramatically splitting apart.
The source actually gives this situation a name. They call it an asset pump. And they define it as a scenario where government policies, whether it's on purpose or not, end up inflating the value of certain assets, in this case real estate, that just so happen to be held by the policymakers themselves.
Okay, so if there is an asset pump, what's fueling it? This is where the argument tries to connect a specific government action directly to that intense market pressure we've been talking about.
And it zeroes in on immigration policy. The source claims that the government is currently overseeing a record-high immigration intake, and it frames this policy as the main engine driving up the demand for housing in a market that's already stretched to its absolute limit.
The source calls this a policy cocktail. The idea is that it's not just one thing, but a mix of factors creating the problem. You have massive demand pressure from migration, that's one ingredient. Then you have critically low housing supply, and the final ingredient, according to the source, is what it calls zero accountability from the government to fix this mismatch.
Now, the script is actually pretty careful to make a distinction here. It goes out of its way to say that the argument isn't a critique of immigration itself or of immigrants. Instead, it's a critique of the timing of the policy, of running a record intake at the exact moment the country's housing supply is at rock bottom. It's framed as a problem of policy, not people.
So all of these points, the crisis, the conflict of interest claim, the policy cocktail, it all builds to a really powerful and frankly provocative conclusion that questions the very nature of the problem itself.
To really hammer its point home, the source puts three numbers right next to each other. A national vacancy rate of just 0.8%, a homeless population of over 100,000 people, and the Prime Minister's personal portfolio of 5 properties. Seeing them side by side like this is obviously designed for maximum impact.
And all of that leads to the final twist in the argument, because after outlining all of this pain and dysfunction, the script makes a really surprising claim. It says the system isn't actually broken at all.
And there it is. That's the cynical thesis at the heart of the source's conclusion. The argument is that because the housing crisis is profitable for property owners, including those in power, there's a built-in financial incentive not to fix it. The system, it alleges, is working perfectly for the people it's designed to benefit.
And the script ends with this memorable, very biting line, which is a play on the Prime Minister's official residence.
It's a final, provocative thought that really just wraps up the entire argument we've just walked through, and it leaves you to think about the weight of the claims for yourself.